While October was not my most prolific reading month ever, I always really enjoy incorporating some spooky season themes into my selection of books for October. And this year I invited you to do that too with my first ever reading challenge, the Bewitched Book Challenge. And if this is something you also participated in, I hope you had a wonderful time. Let's have a look at the spreads I've made for every book that I read in October, as well as some themed overview spreads for November as well. Hi, I'm Erin, and I am super jet lagged right now. More on that later. October was actually my first full month in this traveler's size notebook that I started for my reading journal from the beginning of October, mostly because I ran out of pages in my previous journal. And this is a serious journal size decrease. My previous journal, this is my cat, Mitsu, hi Mitsu. My previous journal was B5 size, so this is much smaller, but we're going to start out by filling in my progress calendar, which is just a visual representation of how long it takes me to read each book that I'm reading. It's really just a calendar with a line on it that represents each book, so I always like to make my lines correspond with the colors of my theme, so I always like to have a good swatch of my pens first. And because I knew when I was doing this particular part of the video that I was going to be leaving the country for 2 weeks and leaving my journal behind, I thought I'd go ahead and write down the numbers of the pens that I'm going to be using for this and swatching them, so that when I get home I don't have to try and work out what I used, I can just refer to the numbers. And I tell you what, future me was very happy that I did that. For purposes of this spread, I'm going with some pens from the Tombow Jewel Brush Pen collection. I have a lot of them. So each one of these lines just represents a different book. So say I started a book on the 2nd and I finished it on the 6th, I would just draw a line from the 2nd to the 6th, and that is how I know that's how long it took me to read the book. I do concurrently use an app called Storygraph to track my reading throughout the month, so I can refer back to that whenever I need this data, but in general, I just like having this page. It's just enjoyable for me. I also kept track of my Bewitched Book bingo stats within Storygraph as well. I had a challenge set up within the Storygraph app, so I have that information ready to refer back to as well, because I was out of the country for half of the month and I did some of my reading during that time, so it was helpful to have an app to keep track of things. Each one of the bingo squares represents a trope, so when I find that trope in a book, I'm just colouring around the outside of the book cover so that I know which square relates to which. Now let's move on to the first of the book review spreads for this video. This spread was actually my very first time ever setting up a book review spread in a traveler's size journal, and I had some ideas about how I wanted to approach it, but I wasn't totally sure how it would go, so this was a big old experiment, as were all of them in this video really. I started out by tearing a Dutch door because I thought it would be cool to use 2 spreads. I am trying to completely fill this journal before the end of the year, and I typically read somewhere between 7 and 10 books a month, but I knew I was also traveling for October, so it wasn't going to be quite as many as that, so I was like, it's okay to go hard on some spreads and use up as much space as I can. So I'm doing Dutch door spreads for all of the books I'm reviewing in this video actually, partly as an experiment, partly to take up some more space, partly to use up some more stationery. Speaking of stationery, if there are any stationery items in this video that you see and you think, oh my goodness, I would love to get my hands on one of those, I have links in the description to as many of the items that I'm using here as I possibly can. Reading journal videos, I tend to use a lot of stuff, so sometimes I run out of characters in the description, but I'll try to link you to as much as I can. At the moment, I'm really enjoying torn edges that are kind of coloured in with some pen. I did that for my October bullet journal and I really liked it, so I thought I'd bring that into this setup as well. Kind of makes it look like the page edge was ripped and then burned, which I think is kind of fun. And the moon washi sheets here are just too incredibly perfect for the book that we're setting up this spread for, which was The Bell Witches by Lindsey Kelk. I've been a Lindsey Kelk fan for quite a while. I follow her across many platforms. She has a beauty podcast that I love. She also has a wrestling podcast that I don't listen to because I'm not interested in wrestling, but I also have always really enjoyed her books, and this is her first foray into fantasy, I guess. Would you call it maybe a paranormal romance instead? I'm not sure. Genres are honestly not my strong suit, but Lindsey is mostly known for her rom-coms, and so this was kind of a bit of a departure from her usual style. I was very excited to read her doing something new. It is very much still in the vein of a typical Lindsey Kelk book. It is quite funny. There are some kind of tropey characters that she often has, like a really zany best friend of the female main character. As the name suggests, there are witches in this story. There are also vampires. It's kind of a coming of age, girly turns 16 and finds out she's a witch sort of a deal. And the house that she then moves to, because she is orphaned now and has to live with her witchy grandmother, is represented on the page here with this lovely sticker from Lace and Whimsy Studios. I just thought that was too perfect, like that kind of haunted Victorian mansion kind of a thing. It's quite central to the story, so I thought it would be a cool opportunity to finally use this beautiful sticker. I've had it for ages. Our young, surprise witchy main character in this book's name is Emily, and I do feel like she and her male love interest character fall into some insta-love, but normally that doesn't do it for me so much, but in this context it really feels quite accurate to like the teenage first love kind of portrayal, and that is really strong and overwhelming and all-consuming, so I think it makes sense in this context. And there were so many squares on the bingo board that this book could be applied towards. I ended up going with the graveyard scene one because it was the first book that I finished for the month, and that one was going to get me the most points. That's a 3-point square, so that's where I jumped in. I attempted to imitate the lettering on the cover of the book, but I kind of ran out of space, so my W is a bit weird and wonky, and the letters get a bit smaller as they get towards the end of witches and get closer together as well, but if you squint your eyes, it doesn't look too bad. This spread was one that I actually set up before I yeeted myself out of Australia and went over to the UK for a couple of weeks for a holiday, and I feel like it shows. I really came back feeling a bit out of practice. I did keep a travel journal while I was away, and I didn't work on it every day, but I did work on it a bit, so it wasn't like I never picked up a pen or anything the whole time I was away, but I really did feel like once I got home, it was difficult to get back into the swing of sitting down to journal and sitting down to film the journaling process, so please bear with me while we do the other spreads throughout this setup. I don't feel like they're my best work ever, but at the same time I had a really good time doing them, and I really don't try to make my reading journal perfect by any stretch, so I think it's fine. I've been accumulating witchy stickers from Sticky for a while, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to use some of them. These ones are from an artist called November Rush. They look a lot like the Marigona Silly stickers, but they're not hers. These are actually a different artist. I feel like the cover art for this book doesn't go so much with my spread that I've made for it, but these are kids with magic powers falling in love, so I figure it's okay to go with a bit more of a cartoony style for this one. And I just really like these stickers, and I was like, when am I going to get to use these? Let's make it now. The pattern that I seem to be falling into with my reading journal spreads in this traveler size journal is that when I tear my Dutch door, I kind of make the first page and a half-ish a decorative spread, and maybe it has a little bit of information on it, maybe it has the star rating and my core pile rating system sticker that I use as a little cheat sheet to keep me on track with my rating system, which I did not come up with. That is someone else's intellectual property, I just use it. And then on the reverse side of the Dutch door, on kind of like the second spread of the pair, that's where I put my review of the book, the kind of more long form text part. And then I feel like I don't have to decorate that part as heavily, and if I don't have as much to say about a book, then this is where a quote goes, because that's how I like to take up space. I quite enjoyed this book. I feel like if you're going looking for something really deep, you're probably not going to find it here, but if you're looking for something that's a bit of an easy read that is a little bit witchy, then this is probably a good one. I ended up giving it 52 out of 70 based on my core pile rating numbers, which means it was a 7.43, which gave it 4 stars in my book, and I think 4 stars is pretty good. That seems to be where I land the most often, is in the 4-star kind of range. And I do have my little core pile rating system cheat sheet back at the beginning of my journal here so I can refer to it. I just always keep the bookmark that has the Archer and Olive little charm on it in that particular page so that I can find it really easily. I also like to have my core pile rating on my overall kind of reads tracking page here so that I can compare them and find out really quickly what my #1 rated read of the month was, because sometimes you'll have like 3 books that all have 4 stars, but you have to work out which one of them had the highest score to work out which one was the favorite. That just corresponds to like I have a standout book section in my reading stats for the month. We're going to flip back a few pages now, and this was my Page Majors book club book for the month of October. I actually picked this one. It was my first time choosing a book for my own book club, which is kind of funny. And if you're interested in joining my book club, that's something that you can do right here on YouTube. You can join my channel. There is a link in the description. And if you join on the Page Majors channel membership level, then you'll get access to my Discord server, which is where I run the Page Majors book club from. So we will announce books there each month. We will all read the book and have a chat about it in a particular thread or channel that's just for that on the Discord. And then we have a little voice/video/text chat about it at a time that's convenient for as many people as possible as well. So if that's something you're keen to get in on, there is a QR code on the screen right now, or you can check out the join link down in the description or near the subscribe button Sometimes it's in a different spot depending on what kind of platform you're watching from. Anyway, enough about the channel memberships, let's talk about the book. My book that I chose for this month was Mort by Terry Pratchett, which I had read years and years and years ago when I was in high school and maybe in my late teens, early 20s, and not since then, and I've just turned 37, so it's been a while. And I am delighted to report that this one holds up. You know when sometimes you go back and read something that you used to love and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, it kind of sucks. That was not the case with this book at all. I had a really good time. If you've never read any Terry Pratchett, he has a very specific, distinct kind of writing style. There are no chapters in his books. There are breaks where scenes change and things, but there's no numbered chapter so that you can be like, I'm up to chapter 24. He also has a really distinct, very British sense of humor, and it's a fantasy series, but it's really unserious. And there are kind of miniature series within the Discworld series overarching as well. So this is the first of the Death books, and Death, as in the Grim Reaper Death, he speaks in a really specific way. And I was doing this one on audiobook and I was like, I'm going to lose some of the Terry Pratchettness of this book, aren't I? It's the way it has to be. Lucky for me, I chose a really good version of the audiobook to listen to. It had 3 narrators. One of them was Bill Nye, the guy who was Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So he just read the footnotes, of which there are a lot in Terry Pratchett books. There was a lady narrator who was the main narrator for the book, and then they had a separate narrator just for the voice of Death. And the way it was done was so good, I really, really enjoyed it. Funnily enough, this one's come out with 7.43 for the core pile rating, which is exactly the same as I gave the Bell Witches, which is a little bit wild. Means it's also 4 stars. And reading this has made me really keen to read some more Terry Pratchett, especially as I'm a Morris dancer now. I feel like he was much beloved by the Morris dancers because he has them in some of the books, so I feel like I have to read all of Discworld now. Get caught up, I think I've read 4 or 5. Typically when I'm setting up my reading journal spreads, I like to do it in a couple of sessions across the course of a month, but this time around I actually did it in just 2. So I did the Bell Witches spread, and then everything you've seen after that I set up in early November once I got home from my trip. For a little bit of context, if you don't live in Australia, it takes around about 20 to 22 hours on planes to get from my city to Singapore to London. So that's a decent amount of time for reading if you're not trying to prioritize sleep. I did manage to finish 2 books, both of which I'd started before I left for my trip, but I managed to finish both of them on the plane on the way to the UK. And then there was a book that I was reading a little bit on ebook on my Kindle while I was away, but not a great deal because I was really tired because we were pumping out the little touristy things every day. We were just going for it pretty hard. We did lots and lots of walking, so I didn't have a lot of time for reading. And I also started an audiobook at one point when we were on a train, but I only listened to 20 minutes, half an hour of it, and then I listened to the rest when I got home. So I have finished these last 2 books that kind of go off the end of the month on my progress calendar there since then, but I didn't finish them in October, so they won't be in this video. They'll be in next month's reading journal video instead. Also, those swatches came in so handy for my Tombos that I used for all of the calendar tracking stuff there, but I can't find one of them, so I couldn't actually finish the line for Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. I've just kind of written the title in instead, and I know where it's supposed to go, but I will have to do that once I find the pen. Whoops. Just updating my October Reads page now. I use my little HP Sprocket mini printer to print book covers for my reading journal, and I really like it for this purpose. If you're interested in that, I have a short about it that you can watch. I'll have that linked in the description for you in case you're keen to find out how I print these book covers with my little instant printer friend. One of the books I've put down there I should not have, and that is Ledge by Stacey McEwen. That's one of the ones that I finished technically in November, so it's going to go into next month's setup. And also Zodiac Academy doesn't really have any right being there either, because that's the audiobook that I started and didn't listen to much of. I have finished that since then too, but there was a book that I finished on the plane that should have been on this page by now that I just forgot about, so don't worry, I'll remember and I'll swap out one of these books for it that's currently not supposed to be on this page, but I haven't quite got there just yet. So first we're just going to update the bingo and make sure that my star ratings are in here for the books that I've done so far. And because I know which tropes some of these are going to apply to because of my Storygraph challenge, I can fill in the bingo board. Here we go. We're going to take off the Zodiac Academy. I'm going to put it back on its backing paper so I can use it somewhere else. And I'm going to add in here The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, which was actually a suggestion from Rachel Burke7969, who commented on my last reading journal video and suggested it to me. Thank you so much for that, Rachel. This has ended up being my standout book for the month, but we'll talk more about it when we get to its spread. For now, let's just get this October Reads page fully populated and the bingo caught up, and then we will carry on with book reviews. Oh, and in case you were wondering, I gave Mort to the murder square. It was actually a difficult one to tie into the bingo board, and I didn't think about that when I suggested it, but hey, if you also read Mort in the month of October, then you get an extra 3 points towards your Bewitched Book challenge, so there you go, plus whatever you got on the bingo board, so that's pretty good. I didn't complete any lines, and I definitely didn't come anywhere near completing the entire bingo board, which I know some people really did, which is just so mind-blowing to me. But honestly, I'm still pretty happy with where I ended up for my October reads and the number of points I got for my little book challenge, because I was a busy gal. I really was, so getting any reading done was honestly a big win. That said, Storygraph does keep telling me that I am 3 or 4 books behind on my goal, and I'm trying really hard not to pay attention to that because I don't want it to be like I'm just reading for the sake of hitting the goal, but at the same time, it's driving me crazy knowing that I'm not on track for it, so I'm gonna have to work out how to navigate those feelings. In the meantime, let's set up a review spread for Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. This one was actually also on the Page Mage's recommended reading list, and I thought I'd switch up my Dutch door this time so it was a horizontal one instead of a vertical one, just to see how that felt. And it didn't feel great, honestly. I didn't really love it. I don't think it's bad, but I think I like my vertical Dutch doors a bit more, so we'll stick to that for the next couple of reviews. But for this one, we're going horizontal just to see how it goes. I mentioned earlier when we were doing the Bell Witches spread that I have a lot of witchy stuff from Sticky that I have been kind of itching to use, so this was a good opportunity to use some of it. I also tried to use these letter stickers. I suppose I succeeded. These are from a sticker book that I got recently from Stationery Pal, and this was my first time using them, and they were really difficult to use, so I don't know if I would totally recommend this, but it worked out okay, you know. It was just really fiddly. It took a long time. Lots of the stickers tore as I was peeling them up, and so you have to try to put it back together when you put it on the page, or you have to kind of peel up another one, so just a process, you know, but I do think it looks kind of cute. I was going for sort of a deep blue and gold kind of a theme here, and I feel like that matches pretty well with the book cover. So this was suggested by one of my page mages, and I've heard people talk about this book before. Of course, I've seen the movie and I love the movie, so this one's been on my to-do list for quite a while, and I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, and I didn't have any thoughts of not finishing it, but I will not be reading any others from this series. Hey, it got me 2 extra points for the challenge, which is always good, and it was perfect for the spooky season, but I don't know, I really struggle going back and reading older books in the current kind of lens of society of today. This book was released in 1995, which is a year that I was alive for, but I wasn't like an adult, so I wasn't really aware of society as much as I guess I am now. And there were just some things that happened in it that I was like, yes, we couldn't do that today. No, couldn't do that. Also, there was a really idiosyncratic thing that annoyed me to no end that is a very modern kind of issue that I have with the book, which is that there's a character called Scott Morrison, which is a pretty generic name, but like if you know, you know. Scott Morrison was a former Prime Minister of Australia, like he was the one who was in power during the pandemic for us. And for some reason, every time he's mentioned in this book, they use his full name. And so I'm just like, what's ScoMo doing here? Why is ScoMo chasing the daughter of one of these witches? Like what? Why? I don't know. That took me out of it, and that's not their fault because like Scott Morrison, the Australian former Prime Minister, was probably also very young when this book came out. Like he definitely wasn't running for office at that point or anything, but you know, it was just weird for me. A lot of this book to me felt kind of shallow and immature, which feels really odd considering you're spending so much of these characters' lives with them. Like you would expect to get a really in-depth view of things, and I feel like I just didn't get that. But I did really like the cats. I liked the cats quite a bit. There was a black and white cat called Magpie, and I was like, oh, that is such a good name for a black and white cat. And I did also really like this quote that I'm including. This quote on the cover page, on the front page of this review says, "Pride is a funny thing. It can make what is truly worthless appear to be a treasure." And that is so true. So I thought that was a good one to have on the page as well. core pile. So quick note on the rating system that I'm using here. If you haven't come across it before, it was invented by a YouTuber who makes book videos. She goes by G. Her channel is called The Book Roast, or just Book Roast. No, the core pile is an acronym and it stands for characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. And you rate each of those categories out of 10. You add up your numbers there to get a number out of 70, and then you divide that by 7 to get a decimal point number that corresponds to a star rating. I ended up with 37 out of 70 for Practical Magic, which gave it 5.28, which meant it was a 3-star read for me, which seems about right. Let's move on to another magical book that I enjoyed quite a bit more, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This one was recommended to me by my friend Jacqueline. She read it earlier in the year and loved it, and I've been trying to get my hands on it ever since. There was a big old queue for the library. I finally got it through the library on ebook, and it just was bad timing because I was really busy, and I ended up returning the ebook and just buying it through the Kindle store instead, and so that was the version that I finished on the plane on the way to the UK. I think maybe when I have really enjoyed a book in this particular Traveler's Notebook kind of Dutch door setup system, maybe you can tell because it gets better decoration on its little front couple of pages than it does if I didn't enjoy it as much. That seems to be the trend so far anyway. If you're not familiar with this story, our main character, Emily Wilde, is a scholar. She's an academic. She's a scientist of fairies, which is a freaking awesome job, by the way. She's out doing field studies in a place I can't pronounce the name of for the life of me, and she's recording a diary of her experiences as she goes, talking about the folklore and the little folk that she meets in these places, and it's set up in this diary format, so you're reading Emily's diary and that's communicating the story to you. This is one of those incredibly cozy, kind of low stakes, really enjoyable romance, but closed door, like very low key romance. It's just adorable, and I really enjoyed this book. I will definitely be reading its sequel. I don't know how many there will be if it's going to be a longer series, but I know there's at least one more after this. The only thing I kind of couldn't get past is the name of Emily's love interest slash academic rival slash kind of boss. His name is Wendell Bamblebee, and I just can't hear that name and not laugh. Like, it's a hilarious name. Wendell Bamblebee. Could you be more British? Although his character is Irish, so maybe he could be more British, actually. I always take a little bit longer to read stuff on ebook than I do on audio because I can obviously multitask while I listen to audiobooks. So this one I read with my eyeballs and it took me an entire month, September 17 to October 17, but I'm okay with that. It's alright to take your time with books. It's okay to read slower. I am internalizing the advice that I give to other people and trying to apply it to myself. Emily as a character is very introverted, which is something I can really relate to. I'm gonna put it on the page in green in a minute, but it's so good I just have to read it to you. It says, "Perhaps it is always restful to be around someone who does not expect anything from you beyond what is in your nature." How beautiful. I love that so much. Also for this spread, I've put my kind of stats down the bottom right corner of the review part of the page because I just didn't have room for them on the previous. I wanted to really go hard on my pretty stuff. I had that gorgeous book cover piece of paper that's from a Paper Monogatari set that I just wanted to really show off. Although I have realized at this point, I haven't actually put the name of the book on that previous spread. I have the book cover, so like it's on there sort of, but those are really small and my eyesight is fading with age, unfortunately, so I like to have a bigger version as well. When I realize that, never fear, I will go back and I will put the name of the book and the author on that first page. It'll be fine. Let's go ahead and work out exactly how much I liked this book with my little core pile rating system here. I ended up with 52 out of 70, which, wouldn't you know it, 7.43 again. This is the third book for October that I'm giving 7.43 to. And they are not all getting the exact same quartile numbers, it's just that they're all still adding up to 52, which works out to 7.43, which works out to 4 stars for Emily Wilde. Bit of a coinky-dink, don't you think? I just thought that was really interesting for, a spooky occurrence for spooky season. Not really. Let's get this Emily Wilde title down on the page, and then we can carry on to our next book review. Moving on to the last book that I'm going to review for this video. This one is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. And as I mentioned, someone recommended this one to me on my last reading journal video. Thank you so much, Rachel, for pointing me in the direction of this book. What a ride. It was a heck of a ride, in fact. This book is written beautifully. It's quite dark. It's a bit of a psychological roller coaster, I think. It doesn't exactly share tropes with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, but I do think that it has some tonal similarities. So I think if you enjoyed Addie LaRue, you would also enjoy The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I would recommend it for you on that basis. This book is so very mysterious. You're kind of following two perspectives. You're following the perspective of a character named Azure. I'm not really sure how we would typically pronounce that in an Australian accent. It's the colour that's like Azure. That's her name. Honestly, I was a bit confused by her name for a while because I was listening to the audiobook version and I really thought the narrators were saying Asher for a long time, like Asher, and it took me ages to work out that it was Asher rather than Asher, which makes sense because the other girlie who was an integral character, her name is Indigo, so of course they both have colour names even though they're not like sisters or anything. Azure is a young girl in a kind of disadvantaged household who grows up in the shadow of her best friend, Indigo, who is a well-to-do rich girl who she keeps telling her that she's going to be the queen of the fairies and that like they're going to come on her 16th birthday and take her away and like, do you want to come with me? What child would say no to that, truly? So we have Azure's point of view in the childhood timeline, and then into their adulthood, we have the perspective of the character known only as the bridegroom. We never get his name. He is this like guy that Indigo has chosen to be her lover, her concubine, her witch king maybe, I don't know, in the future. And he is kind of discovering all these things about her that parallel with Azure's experience as a child. So this dual timeline kind of narration thing is so engaging. It's really good. This book is twisty and turny. It'll keep you on your toes. It's suspenseful. It's sexy. It was a really enjoyable time for me. I've ended up giving it 4.25 stars. I told myself I wasn't doing like quarter-star ratings anymore, but this one was so close to moving up to like the 4.5 stars that I just kind of couldn't acknowledge that about it. So I have broken my own rules of recent. Like I've done quarter stars previously in this journal, but I decided this year rather, not in this journal, but I decided when I moved into this journal that I was just going to do the half stars, and it didn't take me long to change my mind on that, apparently. This one is my Gothic/Dark Academia bingo square read, so I got 2 points in the Bewitched Book bingo for this one. And I'm trying to match the cover of the book a little bit here, mostly in terms of colour scheme and also the theme of the keys. There's 2 crossed keys on the book cover that you may or may not be able to see depending how good your eyesight is. Also, I started taking a calligraphy class recently and I was trying to imitate one of their embellishments along the top of the page here, and I didn't like how it turned out, but then it turned out I couldn't really hide it just by drawing over the top of it anyway, so that's just gonna have to stay there, even though I didn't do a very good job at all. Most of the time when I'm doing audiobook renditions of books, I won't kind of stop and keep track of quotes unless they're really, really good. If I want to include a quote to take up some space on the spread, or just because I remember that it was written beautifully and I want to find one, I'll typically just go to Goodreads and pick one of the quotes that have been kind of cut out there and included already. This one I actually like stopped listening and made a voice note, or like got Siri to make me a note that I could refer back to, because I thought this quote was so beautiful. Some individuals are like portals. The knowing of them makes the world a far vaster place. That is so beautiful. Oh my god, I had to have that one. I will say this book is pretty dark. Like, there is some abuse that goes on in this story. our main two love interests are quite horrible to each other sometimes. Like if you've read the Cruel Prince books, a little bit of a Jude and Carden kind of an energy there, maybe not quite as vicious, but still like it's pretty dark. So just know that going in, like it's not going to be like a light and fluffy read by any means. But I do think it is very much well worth your time. I've ended up giving it 55 out of 70 as my core pile rating score, like from adding the different categories together, which took it to 7.86 as the decimal point score, which means, yeah, 4.25 stars. That's actually it for this spread for now. At some point I'll realize that I didn't do the core pile stuff for it just yet, but for now, the last couple of books there I'm not doing spreads for because I hadn't finished them by the end of the month. I'm just going to go through and do my Bewitched Book Challenge kind of catch up stuff and make sure that bingo's up to date. Here we go, let's add the core piles for the Flower Bride. I just wasn't feeling linear. I was extremely jet lagged when I filmed this. I am less jet lagged now, thankfully, but I really felt like I was completely out of practice, out of whack when I sat down to do this, so things are a bit all over the place. Thank you for putting up with me throughout this very non-linear kind of system. I have been recording my number of points that I was getting for these books and which bingo square they were relating to, but I thought because this is my first time ever hosting a reading challenge and I've got the rules and stuff also within this, it would be really fun to just dedicate another spread to having my results for the book challenge in my journal as well. That just seemed like a good idea. And also that means that if I decide to do this kind of thing again next year, I have a reference that I can refer back to, that I'll be able to see how I structured it, and I can tweak it from there if I think anything needs to change, or I can use it as a template for next year. So trying to be resourceful at the same time. In the original Dropbox folder of the graphics that I made for the book challenge, I've also included some cute little, this is the achievement level kind of graphics that you can include in your journal too if you want to. We haven't added up my numbers together yet, but little spoiler there on the right side, I'm an enchanted explorer, which is really cute. That means I scored between 11 and 20 points, and if you also took part in the Bewitched Book Challenge, then you can also jump back into that Dropbox folder and get a little graphic for the level that you achieved in case you want to include that in your journal or on your Instagram stories or wherever it might be. So I just thought I would mention that in case you weren't aware. Also in my lettering there, I tried to letter the W a little bit differently to how I usually approach it, and I hated it, so just tried to fix it and cover it up with some white paint marker and pretend it never happened. I'm also trying to decorate this in the way that means that it goes with the rest of my theme for the month, and there are links to all of the things that I used to decorate last month in last month's video, so I would recommend you go and check those ones out if you're after the links to, these are the Halloween stickers from the Washi tape shop, but generally, yeah, there are links to those in last month's one, so check those ones out if you want. I'm planning to just use the left page as kind of a list, so I'll put the title of the book and then how many points I got for it, and then I'll just add them up and put that at the bottom of this page, and then on the right page we'll just have a whole moment for my little I'm an Enchanted Explorer sticker that I printed with my sprocket, and just let it really shine because I just thought that would be cute, and the pages in this journal are small, so you don't have to do a lot to fill one up. moment I know you've been waiting for, please feel free to drum roll on your desk if you want to. I scored a grand total of 15 points in the Bewitched Book Challenge, which I think is not too shabby for a gal who was out of the country and not really reading for quite a bit of the month. We're moving on now to my November spreads, and I didn't have a great deal of time to spend on this. We were already into November by the time I made it home, so I wanted this to be a pretty quick and easy setup, so I've gone for some stickers that I knew would be easy, and for some reason I decided watercolor would be quick and easy, and it wasn't not that, but it also, there's always that like drying time you have to factor in with watercolor, so it was definitely a choice, particularly considering that I set up these spreads for November at like 11 o'clock at night, but I was also jet lagged, so 11 o'clock at night felt like 8 o'clock in the morning to me, so it was fine. Having just come back from 2 weeks in England and Scotland, I did get to see a lot of beautiful autumn leaves, which was amazing for me. I'd truly never seen autumn colours like that before, so I had the best time with that, and I wasn't quite ready to let go of that yet, even though it is spring for us over here in the Southern Hemisphere, so I was thinking let's just hang on to these autumn colours a little bit longer, but also the stickers I'm going to pair up with this are, again, autumn coloured, but kind of give the vibe of maybe a little garden party, which is something that's probably going on quite a bit in Australia in the month of November, so I figured it's kind of a dual hemispherical theme, and let's just go with that, shall we? So I'm making this gradienty kind of scribbly, blendy watercolor smush through the middle of the page. I'm going to put my November heading over the top of that, and then I'm using stickers from 3 different packs from JOURNALSAY to fill in the corners. I love getting stickers from JOURNALSAY, they're super affordable and they have really cute, really different kind of stuff. I find you can find some of this stuff on other websites as well, but I feel like JOURNALSAY are pretty speedy about getting new stock in, which is always fun. So these stickers are pretty much branches with different kinds of lights dripping from them. Some of them are more traditional festoon lights, some of them look like little lanterns, which is really cute, some of them are stars, and some of them are more like colourful bulb lights. As I mentioned, I'm kind of mixing 3 different packs together here to make this kind of somewhat symmetrical setup, and I really found that I was falling back on my little sticker spatula guy here. I realised as I was using these stickers that I get really annoyed if the dangly bits dangling from the branches don't fall directly down like they would if affected by actual gravity, so a couple of times I had to peel things back up and put them down again because I hadn't set them on the right angle, but if that's not something that bothered you with stickers like this, you could absolutely put them however you like. I decided I wanted to use my PHOMEMO MO2 mini printer to do my November header here because I wanted the colours to really still come through, and the paper I have loaded up into this thing at the moment has a clear background, so all you would just see is the floating November in front of the watercolor bit, which is really fun. I do have a discount code for the PHOMEMO mini printers in case you're keen. I'll pop that up on the screen for you in case you want to get one of your own. And I used Canva to make the graphic that I ended up printing here. I used a font called Rosella Flourish. I've also used that on some stickers recently for my workshops here in Brisbane, and it was so good and I really liked it, so I thought we'd bring that through. I'm also going to do some titles for the other page sections as well in that same font, so it's very consistent. I am not running any reading challenges in November, so I won't need as many spreads this time to make sure I've got everything covered, so I'm jumping straight into the progress tracker, which is the little calendar guide that I put the lines on top of. This time I'm doing it a little bit smaller, and I'm really positioning it in the top left corner here because I'm going to use all that negative space around the right and the bottom sides for where I put my book covers, and then I'll put my little star rating stamp underneath, and that's where I will track the Corpal rating as well. Each of the boxes in this calendar are 4 dot grid spaces wide by 4 dot grid spaces tall, and the ones at the very top that I'm colouring in with the watercolour paint at the moment are 2 boxes tall but still 4 wide because they have to obviously fit the calendar. I thought it would be fun to put the watercolour in here so I could get that real colour variation and the gradient going on here. It's been a while since I used watercolour in a journal, so it wasn't until around this point that I remembered you want minimal water, more pigment than water, and if you want a lighter colour, you kind of have to mix it with some white rather than just diluting it down with the water. In my experience, I'm not like a hardcore watercolour user, so there are people who do this much better than me. I just was feeling it, so that's what I went for. But that's what I find. Less water, more pigment, and make your colours lighter with white rather than trying to dilute it with water when you're working on this kind of paper. Also, because the watercolor wasn't just in a functional element on my previous spread, I wanted to make sure that it was kind of loose somewhere else on the page again, so I'm just doing this kind of like wibbly wobbly corner. I'm going to do another wibbly wobbly corner in the top left corner as well, and those are going to be kind of where my headings go. So the one for the progress tracker and one for November reads, the both are just going to sit over the top of the watercolor sections there, so they've got something to anchor to. They're not just floating, they're like connected to something else. Remember how I told you I was feeling really jet lagged? Well, here's an example of what happens when you try to journal while jet lagged. I just didn't notice that my camera stopped recording, which is honestly something that can happen to me on a normal day, but I missed the whole putting down the stickers part, so I'm sorry about that, but it really was just waiting for the paint to dry, sticking a little branch thing over the top, and then sticking the headings next to that, and that's it done. We also printed some book covers for the ones that I have already started, the ones that I have on hold currently through the library, and I was planning originally to stagger them. Again, my brain not working so well. I could have just flipped the stagger so that Zodiac Academy was higher and then House on the Cerulean Sea was lower, and so on and so forth, but I didn't because I need the space underneath where Project Hail Mary is there to put the star rating stamp rather, so I should have just flipped them around, but I didn't, and now we're kind of stuck with this weird wonky. Like, why did I do that? I also could have just moved Cerulean Sea down and they at least all would have been in line, and I could have put some washi tape above them or something. I don't know. It's annoying me too, so if that's bothering you, I'm so sorry. I get it. And one more spread for November. I'm just going to do a bar of watercolor down the left and a bar of watercolor down the right because I really want to get these kind of fiery colors onto the page for that consistency. This one's going to be my November reading stats spread, and it's just going to be basically the same layout that I did for last month, but I'm not adding pie charts this time. I'm just going to like write things instead. And we'll have one of our branch stickers in each corner here, so I'm going to allow for that where I put my text and that kind of thing. I always just really track the same reading stats from one month to the next, and I get all my data from this from Storygraph as well, so it's very easy to get all this stuff if you're using a reading app. You do have to kind of update it as you go along manually. You have to say, hey, I'm up to 86% of this book. Hey, I finished it. Here's my star rating. You can leave reviews in the app too. I just prefer not to. I like my reviews to be private in my own journal, so this system works really well for me. I'm not going to be including a dedicated Page Majors spread this month, mostly because our book chosen by Judy, thank you Judy, is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and it's a sci-fi, and I have lots of kind of spacey stickers at the moment that I think I'd really like to use on a spread for that, so I didn't want to limit myself by including this kind of swooshy autumn vibe instead, but I don't know, maybe it could be a bit like a nebula thing, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll give the Page Majors one more of a normal spread. And now my November reading stats page is all set up, we can flip back to my October reading stats spread and fill that one out, fully populate it. Again, I'm so sorry, jet lag, my camera's going to stop recording partway through this again, but I will show you what it looks like all finished so that you still kind of get that really satisfying impression. I read 5 books this month, a total of 1,643 pages. On average, it took me 10 days to finish a whole book. My main genres were fantasy, literary, and contemporary, and my average rating you won't get on screen here, but it was 3.85, so not quite 4 stars. I read 80% audio and 20% digital. I read 40% books that had 300 or more pages and 60% 300 or less. 66% of the books I read I bought, and 33% of them I obtained through the library. And my standout book for October was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. Here she is all populated and even with the pie charts filled in. And with that, we are finished with my reading journal for October 2024. Let's have a flip through everything we just did together. As always, I would love to chat October reading with you. Let me know what your standout book for the month of October was. Let me know what's on your TBR for November. Let me know what you're reading right now. I just want to talk about books. And if you end up making a spread about the Bewitched Book Challenge as well, please tag me. I would love to see. You can find me on Instagram at erinsmith.art in case you want to tag me over there. If you were someone who was hanging out waiting for this video, I'm very sorry that it's going up late. I apologize for my tardiness. I will try to be more on top of it from here on out, but thank you so much for your patience. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, please make sure that you leave a key emoji somewhere in your comments so that I know that you made it all the way to the end. I appreciate you so much. Who knew I'd be enjoying this traveler size journal so much? I actually really like this size for reading journaling, and I have all of these pages left still to fill. If you're keen to keep watching some reading journaling goodness, I have 2 links on the screen for you right now. The top one is to the initial setup in this tiny traveler's journal, and the one underneath is a playlist of all my reading journal videos so far this year.